Full disclosure, news and commentary. It's the August edition for 2025. And where am I? I'm in the place that should be a mecca for all of the wrestlers and wrestling people in Georgia and Florida for that matter. I'm here. You see that guy? That's Casey Vi. You might remember me writing about him when I talked about the Matt Cardona seminar. Casey Vi is the guy that Matt Cardona was interested in the most. He's a great worker. If I was still running a promotion, he's definitely one of those guys that I would bring in. Remember when I bring in guys like Richard Swann, and I bring in all the women, and I bring in Leva Bates, Mia Yim, and I bring in Su Yung. Casey Vi's one of those guys. Really smart, really talented, working in about the coolest shop that you can imagine wrestling-wise. It's full disclosure, and I'm going to talk about a number of things. Probably from another location, but one thing I want to do is I want to congratulate Richard Borger of Face to Face Wrestling for supposedly wasting $79,000 on lawyer's fee only to lose his case. Oh, Richard, I know this means you're going to send me another cease and desist letter and try to pursue something legally, but that hasn't gone so well for you lately. I don't suggest you do it. Congratulations to Simon Sermon for winning that lawsuit. Sorry you had to put out all that money to defend yourself, but you are a man of honor and you defended yourself successfully. Quick question. So, not last weekend, but the weekend before, something came up on my Facebook feed, and it was an old full disclosure from like years ago, where I declared that weekend the biggest weekend in Georgia wrestling for the year. Guess what? It happened again. Because not only did Southern Honor kill it with Rumblejack yet again, which has become arguably the signature event, not only for Southern Honor, but maybe for Georgia wrestling in general. But Viral, without the benefit of guys like Joe Hendry or any of that, have built their promotion to the point where they drew 1,000 legitimately. Thus, Southern Honor and Viral, and the other people that ran that weekend, but really those two, provided the linchpin to make it the biggest weekend once again in Georgia wrestling. Congratulations, guys. It really is impressive. And we got some more to talk about. But I'll add that on later on. But make sure you check out this shop, which is in Deezerland, which used to be the Artagon Mall, but now is a really cool place. Go-karts, all these cool shops, auto museum, and all the wrestling stuff that you could possibly want. Hey, I really want to get the video done today. So before I go to sleep, let's do that. So I want to expound more, not on the Richard Borger lawsuit thing. It's so ridiculous. Larry wrote up a nice thing summing it up for you, by the way. One interesting note is apparently they almost admitted into evidence because they were going to cite things that I said about Richard Borger in full disclosures as evidence of something, which just goes to show how preposterous his case was. And apparently they almost submitted the wrong video. The one I did, the puppet show thing about James Caleb Kitchens and Jeff G. Bailey's confrontation and the cops getting called and all of that. I wish that had gotten shown in court. That would have been a very proud moment. But I'm glad that, hopefully the video with Face to Face is a terrible name of a wrestling show. And the kids being in that sitcom. Hopefully that did get shown or at least referenced in a court of law. That would make me laugh very, very hard. The success of Rumblejack, it's really a testament to a lot of people's work, but really the partnership between Dylan and Gary. I mentioned in the last video, but I haven't heard a lot of discussion about it, maybe because people didn't see it. But in my opinion, the person of the year in Georgia wrestling this year so far is Gary Lamb for a lot of reasons. But that's not to say there aren't other people of significance. A couple of other things I wanted to mention, in addition to the great job that Viral's been doing, and how important the Rumblejack has become. It's become the premier name show in the state of Georgia, which is quite an accomplishment. I want to talk about the success of the Apocalypse versus Squared Circle, the Jonathan Feltner versus John Johnson. Like, the way they paid all that off was so beautiful, and I'm glad they had a good sized crowd to see the blow off. I've been hearing rumors about Jeremy Vane being involved in somehow, some way, and let me say off the bat that I once had a lot of respect for Jeremy Vane, but now I would just, can I really tell anybody what to do? I guess not, but I'm going to. I'm going to highly suggest that Squared Circle have nothing to do with Jeremy Vane. Not as talent, certainly not as any guy in a shot caller or anything like that, until I see evidence that Jeremy Vane has gotten his shit together. I'm just going to leave it there, but nonetheless, I know a lot of things that lead me to believe that Jeremy Vane is not somebody to be trusted right now, which pains me to say. He's one of my favorite guests that we ever had on Tipping Point. He's a guy that I respect, or once respected a great deal, who I think had a lot of knowledge about the wrestling business, certainly paid his dues, and all of that. But right now, I think him being involved in wrestling is the last thing he needs. Yeah. What do we have to look forward to now that the sort of doldrums of the summer in many ways are over and we're going into the fall? Well, one thing that's interesting is visiting Casey Vi at that store. He was bucking hard for me to come to Mayhem at Mills, which is my favorite wrestling show to see in Florida, this Sunday. And if I manage to get myself out of work at a reasonable time, I'm going to try to go. And then possibly write a review. My God, which is like a ton of work. Hopefully worth it. I really love the idea of being involved in wrestling in some way, shape, or form, which is funny because I've never been less interested in the WWE. I think it is less pro wrestling than it ever has been. I think they have given up the game of just trying to hide the fact that it's just a big money grab. And it just feels distasteful. It feels distasteful that they're going to want $30 a month for this and more money for Netflix. And I have very little interest in what's going on. And I guess that means it's really not for me. It doesn't mean it can't be for anybody else. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily losing money. But what it does mean is they've made it so wrestling is in a weaker position than it has been in the public consciousness. It's in my lifetime. It's never felt less rebellious. And the number of people who are desperate for it to be great is an indication of how great it is not. The number of people who I consider to be not that knowledgeable about wrestling, who tried to claim that the WrestleMania main event with John Cena was the most successfully pulled off thing in history. And it just goes to show how desperate people are to have pro wrestling be as good as they want it to be. It's the ultimate sign that just because something is commercially successful, WWE's benefited from figuring out how to make money with the wrestling business with a different framework and dynamic and business model than had previously existed. And now AEW is kind of following suit with them, except AEW creatively has recovered. And now, I would say, greatly exceeds the WWE. And the story, again, that I find most interesting that people aren't talking about is the fact that AEW turned a profit in 2024. That's important. Now, we can argue why that is, etc., etc., etc. But they did. They turned a profit. So all the doomsayers saying like, oh, this is their time, they're WCW, they're collapsing. If they haven't figured out that AEW is much like many indie promotions out there, as long as the people who want it to keep going, it's going to keep going. And the fact that their ratings aren't as high as they could be, and the fact that not as many people are showing up in the arenas as could be, is irrelevant. Do the stations that have AEW like the ratings that they're getting them? Yes. Do they want them to be higher? Who wouldn't? But they're happy with what they're getting. The WWE, when they make all these contracts, are people aware that the stations that have them don't turn a profit on them? They don't. They don't make money. They're giving the WWE all this money to not make money on them directly. But they still want to have them. And if that isn't the most enviable position pro wrestling could possibly be in, I don't know what it is. And what it should do is it should spur creative juices and getting to you emotionally. Instead, what they're doing is they're casting a wide net by having a muted product. And at my age, and as long as I've been involved in wrestling and watching wrestling, I have no interest in watching that shit. I'll listen to recaps of the shows and just laugh at how fucking boring it is. And this is my call out to promotions in Florida, but really promotions in Georgia who listen to me. Stop being fucking boring. I'm not saying you all are. I'm saying I'm looking for someone to goose me. I'm looking for someone to grab that interest. Because if you get my attention, you're going to get a whole lot of people's attention. Because I'm the hardest one to please in many ways, I think. So, again, kudos to the people who are having success. Kudos to a lot of new voices out there. Kudos to a lot of people who are running things and doing it very well. But to the people who think that they're doing this unbelievable job, I don't know if anybody's doing creatively a mind-blowingly great job. So I can't wait to see who is. Because I've decided, like with my Person of the Year thing, I'm going to have my own categories. And one of them is going to be who's doing the best, most interesting work as an individual wrestler and as a promotion. Who's just doing the most interesting work to me? These awards are going to be very personal, right? Who I think the Person of the Year is. Who I think has the greatest potential down the road. Who I think embodies kind of a spirit that I had. I mean, it seems incalculable that we ran so many shows, 2 a week and then an extra one a month. Not running 9 or 10 shows a month at one point, and keeping a high level of creativity and always looking for a different way to do something in a wrestling ring. It's why people kind of gathered around that vision and helped out. Talking to Simon Sermon today, we were talking about the court thing, but it made me realize how long it had been since I talked to him. And he was one of those guys that was instrumental at PCW. I mean, him lending us a ring so we could have one at the Academy Theater and then have my ring at the Jungle was invaluable, you know. He really supported things. He came in and did so many great spots. And I was proud. I was proud to be the one who booked him as a face, unapologetically. I was glad I saw him at that. I mean, this is crazy, right? When did I first see Simon Sermon? I first saw him at those, oh God, what were the name of those shows? But they drew 1,000 at one point. And they would bring in TNA stars. Like I remember one, they had like Kevin Nash and they had like Awesome Kong. And, you know, he was a heel on that show. And I went with a bunch of female friends that didn't know anything about wrestling because I wanted to get their take. We were going to run shows in Atlanta, and I knew we had to be a little different. And they saw Simon Sermon and saw him do his thing, and they went, "Get him, Steve. But don't make it so the crowd chants, homophobic slurs at him." I'm like, "No, we're going to be in Atlanta. That guy's going to be a hero." And I approached Simon afterwards, and the rest is history. Are there people doing that right now? Like I don't know if there were any major shows in Georgia that I did not frequent. And I talked to talent that I wanted to come work my shows. I went out and saw them. Is anybody doing that now? Is anybody going to other shows and seeing who's great and bringing them in? Or do these promoters, the same promoters who always bitch, "People don't share my flyers," are they doing work? Are they going to other people's shows? Are they finding wrestlers and talent to be on their shows? Something to think about. In any case, I'm looking forward to going to Mayhem at Mills this Sunday. And we're changing the format of Tipping Point. I'll talk more about that later on. I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to put this video together, hopefully put it up and go to sleep. In any case, this has been Full Disclosure.